Onto moral realism and artificial intelligence. So we've spoken about how anti-realism probably means that there could be any kind of like value drift. If AI came to its own values, it might be quite orthogonal to our own. And for instrumental reasons, achieving its values could be inimical to our interests. Now, the idea of indirect normativity is to seek to achieve some form of moral rightness through indirect specification without, trying to specify all the laws and rules, Asimov's laws, or all the right virtues. If a moral rightness can be found via moral realism, would that make indirect normativity a simpler approach? I won't say just simpler, but a more effective approach at achieving beneficial outcomes than us trying to encode laws and rules into an AI?
I think it could help. Yeah. So if there is a truth independent of our minds about how, about right and wrong, then that means that an artificial intelligence could set about to go try to discover it. And we wouldn't know what that is. So we probably shouldn't program it to be a utilitarian or to be a Kantian or something. Instead, we should say go out there and find the moral truth, whatever it is, and get back to us about it. I think if moral realism is true, then that would be, that's at least a possibility that that artificial intelligence could go discover and report back to us about, how we ought to be acting. That would be a good thing for sure. I guess I certainly wouldn't want to say it's guaranteed that it will go out there and find the moral truths. Why not? Well, it could be that the moral truth is so complicated that it couldn't get a grip on what that truth is. In the same way that there may be no artificial intelligence, even super intelligent AI couldn't predict what is going to happen next in the economy because it's too many computations to run, even for a super intelligent AI. It can't predict, even if there's a super intelligent AI, it probably can't just perfectly predict the future. Why is that? Well, because physical reality is way too complicated. It can't even perform those. So if more reality is complicated in that way, then it's going to do a much better job than we would. So it's still a good idea to tell it to go try to figure things out. It's still going to get a better grip on things than we will, but there's no guarantee that it's going to get a perfect grip on it. The other thing is, we need to know more about, this is a good reason to do more work on moral epistemology and especially moral intuition, because we'd want to know, can artificial intelligence have moral intuitions? I suspect that it can. I don't see no reason, if we're, flesh and blood creatures, and of course, I don't think that our consciousness is identical to any physical thing, but I think, once you arrange our physical bodies in a certain way, it gives rise to this stuff. I think the same thing could be true of artificial intelligence. We could arrange bits in a certain way that, gives rise to these agents who can have the same sorts of intuitive experiences that we have. If they can have these intuitive experiences, then that's really good reason to think that they're going to get a grip on moral reality. If they can't, though, if for some reason, say, artificial intelligence just can't become conscious, then they can't have intuitions, because intuitions are conscious experiences. They're intellectual appearances. That is, the world is presented to you as a certain way. When I consider the case of kids burning a cat, the world is just presented to me as that's wrong. It's not like a belief that I have. It's when I consider the case, it sort of strikes me that involuntarily that's morally wrong. But if artificial intelligence is not capable of having conscious experiences, they can't have intuitions, which means they're going to have trouble getting a grip on the moral truths. And so then maybe it's not going to be so easy. So that's a big, long way of saying it's going to depend on their capabilities, whether or not we can just say, hey, go figure out the moral truths. They're going to need the equipment necessary to engage in that kind of inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, let's then bridge into what kinds of capabilities would be ideal to sort of seed in an AI first. So it sort of converges on some sort of closeness to moral tracking, and maybe, is more aligned with a moral arc if there is one. Now, you mentioned cat burning a couple of times. It's horrible to think that this was like a form of entertainment in hundreds of years ago. And people used to go out and watch cats get burned, and that was, like a Friday night event. People would just, or chase after pigs with a club and watch people club them to get death and things like that. It was just the brutality of entertainment in the old world seems quite strikingly, obviously bad to us today, and most of us wouldn't really sort of like that. But it does seem as though it does point to the idea that there seems to have been some moral progress. So yeah, back to the original question: what features or what characteristics should we build into an AI so that it aligns or tracks with a moral arc or finds moral or just moral realism? What are your thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, so how can we make it a good, if moral realism is true, how could we create like a good moral inquirer? Yeah,
Yes.
so one thing we're going to need to do is sort of give it a grip on moral concepts. So, generosity, rightness, wrongness, goodness, badness, permissibility, impermissibility, the doctrine of double effect, which is like, foreseeing consequences versus intended consequence. What's an intention? These sorts of things, like we need to give it these moral concepts so it can understand. So not only like what these properties are, but the relations between these properties. So we need to give it concepts. Might need to give it. Might need to be conscious so that it can have use these concepts, and on the basis of those concepts consider various alternative possibilities and have intuitions about those possibilities and draw conclusions from them. It's going to need to be good at.
Consciousness, do you mean self-introspection, or does that also include sensitivity to the pain and pleasure axis?
I was thinking phenomenal consciousness. That is the kind of consciousness like that you might call having the lights on. That is where you have you can see red and those sorts of things. Though I'm not I guess I shouldn't say you must have that. I guess it may be possible to have something like intuitions or presentations that are not themselves conscious experiences. I'm not sure. But I think it would be sufficient if they were conscious to help them have, intuitions in intellectual appearances, if you prefer that term. But you'd also want them to be good at reasoning, where they can see the logical connections between certain claims, so that they can trace out the implications of various theories and assess the implications for plausibility or implausibility. Maybe they could show that, look, if you have this theory, you're going to get a contradiction. And so we can't see that because we can't reason as far down the line, but they can. That would be really nice. So what you'd want is for them to be able, have these concepts, see the relations between them, be able to reason really far down the future, be able to assess the implications for plausibility and implausibility, be able to see if they make arbitrary distinctions or non-arbitrary distinctions. So that's part of what moral reasoning consists in is, look, if you think that your suffering is really bad, but you think other people's isn't, you'd want to know, like, why is that the case? And so you'd want to be able to assess, like, whether there are good justifications for treating what look like similar cases differently. And you'd want to see if a theory does that, treats similar cases differently in an unjustified way or justified way. So these are, in other words, what you would need to do is basically reproduce in the artificial intelligence many of the things that we do when we're considering things. You just want it to be way better. So, it can hold much more in its mind at one time and can draw out implications much better than we can and see ways in which it's being inconsistent and ways that we can't see ourselves being inconsistent. It can you'd want it to be pretty good about what you might call introspection, but in any case, sort of subjecting the principles that it employs to scrutiny. Testing those principles that it's using against all kinds of hypothetical cases. So these are all things that you'd want it to be able to do. And how did I get all those features? Really, I'm just reproducing the kinds of things that we do when we're engaged in moral inquiry. And there may be still other things that it may come to realize, there are other features, or there are other ways to engage in moral inquiry that you guys aren't doing, but I'm going to begin doing it because I can see that, this is a good way to engage in moral inquiry. That may be true as well, but at least to start would be those sorts of things that I described.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, like there is still a lot of concern, still justifiable in my lights, in that AI could optimize for a very narrow spectrum of goals at the expense of a lot of other very important goals. May make its life purpose to maximize paper clips and paper clips are made out of atoms, we're made out of atoms too, and it may borrow or take our atoms in order for it to maximize paperclips, whether we get turned into paperclips or computonium in order to optimize making paperclips indirectly, I don't know. But I'm still worried about the phenomenon where AI does sort of execute unwisely on our very sort of unwisely specified goals. Now, but it does seem as though large language models, for instance, and some of the more complex AI, is producing very interesting output. Now, whether it's just glorified stochastic parrotry, where it's just really looking at doing a massive, complex database search on all human knowledge generated by human intelligence and wisdom encoded in text, or whether it's actually understanding things and putting things together in ways that is unique and novel and not just like regurgitating stuff that it's read. There is some interesting research into a grokking phenomenon on smaller problems, but I don't know whether this sort of grokking, sort of seemingly understanding phenomenon will scale. But yeah, it does seem as though AI is competing rather well in moral Turing tests. Maybe you've read about this, where AI has produced more coherent and better written essays than humans have, average humans. But humans still can guess which is the AI-produced papers because of the way that they're written and the cohesiveness of them. Right. It's not that they beat the Turing test, the moral Turing test. It's that they're providing very, very interesting essays on ethics. But yeah, I was just wondering what your thoughts on I guess, frontier models in artificial intelligence are achieving, and whether it looks hopeful for an ethical future.
Yeah, to the extent that I know what those new models are doing, and I don't know very well. I mean, I think certainly they could probably do a lot better than many human beings. That's because a lot of human beings, aren't that good at this kind of stuff. They don't, and it's not entirely because they're stupid, though I'm sure some people are just stupid, but in many cases it's not that. It's just that they don't think about this stuff very much, because they have lots of other things they got to be doing. And, large language models have access to, just an insane amount of data. So I suspect that they can do better, I'll just say this, producing answers to moral questions, in what look like compelling ways. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know what's going on underneath the hood, so I can't say if they're understanding what's happening here. But I can say that they almost certainly they certainly appear to be much better reasoners than most people, including myself, probably. I mean, there's so many moral questions where there's a lot of it depends on empirical facts that I have no idea about, and the large language model totally would know the facts. So that's all to say. I'm hopeful in this sense that they're going to produce really excellent answers, much more excellent than what human beings could do. Whether they know what they're doing, harder to say, and I don't know if I have settled views about that. But certainly there's something to be optimistic about. That is, like, when we encounter novel problems, we could feed it to an LLM and at least get started on identifying the relevant moral considerations.
Let's just say that large language model, for the most part, still remain sort of opaque, and we can't really see what's going on underneath the hood, but more and more it produces very sensible output. How, under these conditions, not having some transparent interpretability modules built into large language models, assuming that all we have is a black box, what kinds of tests would you be interested in seeing crafted and performed on these AIs to, I guess, adjudicate whether they're actually doing morality or just regurgitating text, human text?
Yeah. Oof. This is in some ways a science question, and so what I need to know is, like, well, what would you expect from something that isn't doing moral reasoning and something that is? And nothing comes to mind because I'm not in, I don't have the cognitive habit of sort of designing studies. So I don't know if I have anything, helpful to say here. because I mean, and part of it is that the large language models are chatbots, so what they're meant to do is to mimic how human beings produce linguistic outputs, and that's sort of the way we test whether human beings are engaged in moral reasoning or not. I mean, I guess one thing you might do is, like, if you could in some ways give it agency to where it can set plans and act, then you could sort of observe its behavior and see if it is inclined to act in accordance with what it says or its moral judgments. That might be some evidence. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm committed to the possibility of what are called amoralists. That is, people who can perfectly well reason about morality, come to the correct conclusions, and just not care at all. And so, so I even observing behavior isn't going to isn't going to be decisive evidence in one direction or another. It could be that they're performing perfectly, great moral reasoning, but it doesn't show up in their behavior because they don't care. They're a moralist. So I can't think of any sort of decisive experiment that you could design. Given that possibility.
I don't know if there is one either, unless you could really look inside its code and find all the causal reasons why it would act in a certain way. But yes, if without perfect knowledge of how an AI worked, or without perfect containment strategies, an AI could just take a treacherous turn, which is not unsimilar to humans, right? I mean, it may be the case that it may be a better bet to trust AI to come at the correct moral outcomes. Yes, but without knowing that it cared, how can you know? If it's a perfect moral reasoner but had no care, it could take a treacherous turn at some stage in the future once it had decisive strategic advantage, and then, hey, we're all doomed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess in the early stages when it's still delivering like good judgments, it would be great as like an oracle or just like this thing that we can consult to get true, the correct answers. But you wouldn't want to be like friends with it or anything like that. Like it wouldn't be, especially moral. But as you say, I mean, it could gain our trust and then eventually, once it takes the treacherous turn, begin giving us, false moral judgments and, take advantage of our deferring to it in virtue of its, superior moral reasoning.
Yes, so, I mean, we should be careful about epistemic deference, but on the other hand, I think we should also be careful about trusting too much of human wisdom as well. Because I think, we could really use AI, at least to inform our own strategy. I mean, look at, the outcome of some of these games that AlphaGo or AlphaZero has outperformed humans in, Go, chess, shogi, 3D games, StarCraft, and all that sort of stuff. New strategies have been witnessed by humans that AI have deployed in defeating humans, and now humans are studying these strategies and have learnt to use them in their own games. Maybe there's something like that we can do in ethics and morality. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I can imagine new techniques in reasoning, or maybe even non-reasoning, that artificial intelligence may make use of that we just never considered, that would help us come to know the moral truths, if there are such things independent of our minds.
Yeah, as part of the goal of indirect normativity, Nick Bostrom in his book Superintelligence, he wrote that yes, we could get AI to an oracle stage, and the oracle would be able to sort of simulate, hopefully without not too much mind crime, the outcomes of civilizations built around certain configurations of moral principles and certain, I guess, value sets, right? And then report back on how many lives saved, disability adjusted life years, and DALYs, QALYs, and all that sort of stuff. And then to say, okay, this is where how secure a civilization would be at the end of it. Like, it's okay, you've got the well-being of the people in the civilization, but how fit is it for surviving outliers or surviving, some sort of rare but very devastating existential crisis, those sorts of things. So existential security, well-being, and maybe even curiosity. We wouldn't want a civilization that was necessarily stuck in its way. And we mentioned this before in the first part of the interview, where we'd want some form of like courage to explore for new vistas of novelty and new vistas of meaning and all that sort of thing. So we wouldn't want to like be damned, have a civilization which was completely damned in some suboptimal utopia. But yes, the AI could report back in many ways in which, and also, you know, the reasons on how it produced different models of future civilizations based on value configurations and moral configurations. So, yeah, I just wonder if you had any thoughts about that long rant of mine.
Well, yeah, no, that's excellent. No, I was actually, you know, thinking to myself, that's an excellent example of what I was just suggesting, which is like it may come to discover new methods of moral inquiry that we are not currently using. And one way is just running models. That is like, imagine you had a society, you know, that, you know, had these values. How would it turn out? And you could just watch it, you know, unfold. And if it would turn into a disaster, that's at least some good evidence that maybe these are not these are not good principles to live on. And what's nice about simulations is that you can alter just tiny little things, and you could sort of see where the problematic feature shows up. Of course, you'd always have to worry about, well, are the agents in the simulation themselves enduring all this suffering? If so, maybe that's a reason against not doing it. But suppose, like, you know, suppose you could run the simulation without anyone actually suffering in the ways that, you know, that would be an excellent form of moral inquiry to see, you know, whether the principles that, you know, we seem plausible to us would in fact sort of work out long term. Now, I guess it is conceptually possible that there are truths about morality that are individually justified and true, but when, you know, used in the aggregate would lead to disaster. So I at least want to say that it could be a possibility, but in general, I think what morality is about us treating one another and cooperating in ways that lead to our flourishing collectively. And so at least it's pretty good evidence that a principle is correct, that it would lead to to a flourishing society as opposed to destruction.
Yeah. One of the things that Derek Parfit and some of the population axiologists were worried about is a repugnant conclusion, you know, where you have huge amounts of life. Let's say AI says, okay, let's make life, and just seed slime mold on every planet in the universe. But, you know, slime molds having maybe just one micro dot above, like, you know, zero hedonics or whatever, you know, just lives barely worth living. That wouldn't be a future that would be something we'd sort of think is amazing. It's repugnant a future, right? Or there's a sadistic conclusion, which I kind of forgot how that works. But yeah, there's all sorts of worlds we don't want to go at. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what if we do get to superintelligence and we do get superintelligent oracles to produce these sorts of models and have us compare them. Even if it does we do come up this ideal world that is worth tracking and worth striving for, how are we going to get everybody to agree on what these are? You know, how are we going to, if there's a plurality of ideas out there, there's the problem of getting everybody to agree on what's the right move forward. Or what do we do? Put everybody in a bubble world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I would probably outsource that problem to the superintelligence. I would say, figure out how to get everybody to agree about this. Yeah, but I mean, what you're pointing out is that, like, I mean, if you're an anti-realist, just to bring it back to meta for a second, if you're an anti-realist about morality, so you think it depends on some perspective or other, you know, if you think it depends on some human perspectives, well, you're going to get incompatible perspectives from lots of people. Even the idealized version of themselves or idealized versions of certain societies. So, you know, what value should the AI implement? Well, if you think that the truth about, you know, what's worth pursuing depends on our attitudes, it may differ from culture to culture. So there's not going to be a uniquely correct answer. There's going to be lots of different correct answers to those sorts of questions. And those values may be incompatible. And so there may be no way. You said, how do we get everybody on board? Well, you might not want to get everybody on board if what's morally right and morally wrong depends on a certain perspective, say a culture, You might want everybody in the culture to get on board, and but not everybody, in general. But if moral realism is true, you probably want everybody on board because there's just one truth about how you ought to live, and then you'd want the AI to get people on board.
Well, yes, if moral realism is true, that would make
true.
the outcome a lot simpler to sort of implement, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Another idea that people have kicked around for quite some time is bubble world hypotheses, where you have superintelligence just being wildly beyond anything that we can imagine, but could harvest enough resources to make bubble utopias with permeable borders, where people would be able to sort of live the Islamic utopia or live the Christian utopia, but have also the choice to move out of it if they wanted to. If they found, I'm not sure that this utopia is as good as what I thought it would be, I'm already bored of my 72 wives or whatever, and wanted to move into wanted to test the waters in what the heaven of another culture would be like. Or what's your utopia? Mine's this, that, and the other. And maybe there'll be a debating utopias, like Utopia, where everybody could sort of join a big Valhalla of people, instead of with swords but with gabbles, and and debating what the good life would be. I don't know, but at least it sounds interesting that you could appeal to a variety of preferences, a plurality of values, where you had self-contained utopias sort of optimizing for many different sort of value configurations. But that's not something we can do today very easily, so it's kind of hard to imagine.
I mean, we can do something like it. I mean, a lot of people have suggested this, at least in America, where we're more skeptical of broad, government power, and we're more libertarian and stay off my line. I mean, there's a lot of people in America have this sort of vision. What you should do is just let people, rather than having these laws that apply to 325 million people, you should have just a bunch of small, organizations where people can move and live with the people they want to live in. If they want to live, in an Amish society, they should be allowed to live in an Amish society. And if you want to have an Islamic society, that's great. And if you want to have a secular humanist society, that's great. But you should let people move around, and you shouldn't try to govern all these people with all these various views and values with one set of laws. Here's the laws about abortion for everybody. That's what leads to political chaos in America. And here's the views about I don't know, whatever, the economy or whatever. You should let communists be communists, and you should let the capitalists be capitalists. But voluntarily, at least. So that's a view that's not uncommon in America among libertarians, at least, that we should get the central government out of a lot of our business and let people just sort of live in the communities that they want to live in.
Mm-hmm. This idea of AI bootstrapping to some kind of transformative AI superintelligence, it sort of begins to sound like some proto-ideal observer, but of course it doesn't have access to everything, and it's not omnipotent, doesn't live on the top of all time, and it can't sample all the future. It can only just predict still. But is there any convergences in theories about how ideal advisors or ideal observers might go about solving moral problems that we might expect to be similar with just a super intelligent artificial intelligence?
So the question is, if we had a super intelligence, would they serve as more or less an ideal advisor or an ideal observer? I suppose they could in many ways. And then the question about whether we should listen to them is really going to depend on whether we think, moral realism is true or something like ideal advisor is true. I will say this, one way an ideal advisor can be ideal is they're ideally good at detecting the moral truths. And if that were the case, then superintelligent AI may discover the moral truths and then report them to us. And that could serve as a helpful, coordinating, central figure. If, however, what the ideal advisor is doing, the moral anti-realism is true, and it's just having reactions, because it's impartial or whatever, it's less clear how that's going to, or why we should listen to it, I guess. I mean, I guess, yeah. It would, of course, know, most of like the suffering that various policies will cause, and it will know a lot about how it affects various people, and that's all good things to know. But then we'll always be confronted with this question, which is, okay, so the superintelligent AI gave this judgment about what we should do. We now have this question: should we listen to it or should we not? If its determinations just determined the moral truth, then I guess we should listen to it. But that would be true only if Ideal Advisor or something like it were true. If moral realism is true, then at the end of the day, once it issues its proclamations, we should at best, we still have room for questioning whether or not it got it right. But if it's correctly identified the mind independent truths, then we have good reason to think it's probably more right. It's more likely to be right than we are. So maybe we should listen to it.
How would we know that it had correctly identified the moral truths? Would it be able to intelligibly present its lines of inquiry? It's the algorithm of its logic, the structure of its logic.
Presumably, it would, at least to some degree. So we could just ask it, well, can you explain to us in a way that's intelligible to us, like how you decided, whatever you decided? And presumably, if it's super intelligent, it can do a reasonably good job of communicating that to us. Though it may be true, and I suspect it will be true, that at the end of the day, it's much more complicated than what it said to us, because my own view is that moral reality is radically complicated. So I mean, I think it probably could communicate to some degree the justification for its judgments, but it's going to be incomplete. But if it's super intelligent, then surely it can do a reasonably good job. And now you ask, like, how are we going to know if it's getting a grip on the moral truths or not? I mean, my first inclination is just to ask it, like, hey, are you a realist, and do you regard yourself as finding the moral truths and reporting them to us, or are you just like being an impartial spectator and having reactions to us? And then I'd want to know, wait, why do you have the reactions that you do? Like, why do you react the way that you do? If it's not in response to moral features that you're detecting, then why are you reacting the way that you do? Why do you have the recommendations that you do? What justifies those recommendations if there's just no truths moral truths that you're responding to? Those are a bunch of considerations that occur to me. I don't remember if I answered your question though.
No, that's pretty good. It's just, I mean, what I'm worried about. I mean, if let's just say we do develop superintelligence, and there's a lot of human interests who want to get out there and shape the AI to be slanted somehow in their favor. But they're also wanting to convince everybody that it's the right thing to do, right? That their AI or the AI that they want to engineer, a lot of people are going to want to race to sort of prompt engineer the AI to be sort of biased in their way, to their favor. So it seems as though we need some form of verifiable means, or it would be desirable to have a verifiable way for AI to justify its position on what kinds of future trajectories of civilization we should move towards. So what the future trajectory would look like near, medium, and long term. But if the details are so complex that it's just so hard to understand, then that'd be annoying. Because then how could we verify it, right? How could we know that it's going to be in everybody's interest? How can we know that it's not going to optimize for life based on slime molds everywhere, or just some quivering ball of utopic jelly? I don't know.
Probably when it comes to verification, I mean, we're never going to be able to be certain, right? At the end of the day, it could always be manipulating us either on behalf of some other humans or itself. But I mean, one way to check is just to ask, like, what's the story here about why you recommend what you recommend? Tell us the justification, and you have to hear it out. And if it strikes you as compelling, then that's at least some good evidence that it's on the right track, and it really is like identifying the morally important considerations. and that's probably as good as you could do. I mean, you could say, yeah, tell me more about why you think this is justified. It may tell you about its intuitions. It might tell you the implications of the various policies. It might say, look, I ran all these simulations, and look, here's what the outcome. But as I say, at the end of the day, you can't be sure it's not manipulating you. I will say this. If we just consider the alternative, which is, for many large-scale decisions about how society goes, we have governments, and those are not any better in terms of articulating the ideas to us. We should have very little confidence that they're, correctly identifying the morally relevant features and acting on that basis better than the artificial intelligence is. So that was all just to say, look, we can't be sure the artificial intelligence is identifying the features correctly and reporting them to us correctly, and that sucks, but it's probably better than the alternative that we have now, which is just, groups of people sitting in rooms and, legislating and things like that. They're way worse. So if you ask me, which would you prefer, the actual governments that we have or a superintelligent AI, I guess I'd say, I'm not terribly comfortable with either one, but I guess I'll go superintelligent AI.
Well, you were involved in studies on marketing and markets and ethics, and also you've studied politics and a philosophy of religion. So I'm wondering how you think that moral realism might intersect with market dynamics and political machinations and
Yeah.
and different religious codes, and how that might influence the way transformative AI might emerge.
Yeah, I guess if you're a realist, then you think that, again, there's a truth independent of our minds about what's good and bad. And I think you have to think that markets are probably not going to be perfectly tracking what's mind independently good and bad. But I'm still a generally pro-market guy, only because I think that for the most part, people are pretty good at knowing what's in their interests and what's good for them. And markets are the kinds of things that incentivize people to create products that other people want and to exchange them to them voluntarily. And it gives us an incentive to work hard and innovate and create products that are going to be, for the most part, desired by other people. And it helps us incentivizes us to get our prices down and those sorts of things. So in general, I'm a pro-market guy because in general, they tend to promote the interests of human beings, which is, I think, going to be I think it's morally good. It's not perfect because, there are markets for, heroin and fentanyl and really dangerous things that people want, but are not in their interest. But for the most part, it does a pretty good job. So that's just to say, I think markets are pretty good at, promoting what is mind independently good. But they're not perfect because they're responsive to our preferences, and our preferences aren't perfectly tracking the moral truths. As far as religion goes, I don't know if I have much to say about that other than I guess if some religions are true, then we don't need to worry about superintelligent AI exterminating all human beings because you might think, look, God's not going to allow that because God created us and he's in control of our lives and he has a purpose for us. And so he just wouldn't let us be destroyed. And I guess at the end of the day, so I am religious, I'm a Christian, and I guess I think at the end of the day, I think probably we won't be destroyed by superintelligent AI. First of all, the reason I say probably is because, I don't know God's purposes. Maybe he will let us be destroyed. I don't claim to know, everything about God's mind. The other thing is, I'm not certain that Christianity is true. I think it's probably true, but I'm not certain that it is. And so I still am glad that people are, trying to prevent artificial intelligence from destroying us because I think if Christianity is true, we probably won't be destroyed, but I could be wrong. And if I am wrong, and if Christianity is false, then I hope somebody else is worried about, us being destroyed by artificial intelligence and we'll prevent it because I guess God's not going to because he's not there. So that was all, just some ways in which, religion and artificial intelligence and superintelligence specifically interact in these ways. Maybe one more thing to say is when it comes to markets and superintelligence, I think the way we're going to get it is by market forces. I think there's an economic incentive for firms like Anthropic and OpenAI to create these products. It's because they're going to be enormously powerful and they can sell their services to lots of people or use their services for to gain wealth and to hopefully benefit people, but get subscribers and things like that. And so the way we're going to get it, superintelligence AI, is through these innovators who are producing these products due to market forces. Maybe one more thing. I think you asked about governance. I think I have very little confidence that governance is going to be able to do anything to prevent superintelligent AI from coming into existence or being harmful or helpful. I think for the most part, governments are impotent there. I mean, when there is just an enormous demand for this thing, there's very little that governments can do to stop it. And you can just see that when you think about drugs. So in the United States, there's a war on drugs. The government tries to stamp out all kinds of drugs. They're terrible at it. And that's because you can't stop people from wanting and creating drugs. There's just a huge demand for it. When there's huge demand, somebody stands to make a lot of money by creating that product. And so, drugs are here and they're, pervasive in American culture. And that's because there's a demand for it. And it doesn't matter what your laws are. If they're not sufficiently punitive, you're not going to stop people from doing it. If the benefits of creating the product are high enough, people are going to create the product, and that's similar to what's going on with artificial intelligence. The benefits of creating the technology are just too huge. They're going to create them. And even if governments in the West would successfully stop people from creating artificial intelligence, I mean, China's not going to stop pursuing artificial intelligence. So I think Western countries should, go pretty hard in developing artificial intelligence so that they don't get, destroyed by other countries. It's kind of a mess. Because, it's a little bit scary. I have no confidence that market forces and those creating superintelligent AI due to market forces are going to do it well or safely. I'm just telling you a prediction about what's likely going to happen, which is that they're going to develop it because there's a huge incentive to do it.
Yeah. I see that, obviously, because of market forces, we've got a lot of stuff that we wouldn't have had. It seems as though, this idea of exchange and division of labor and division of expertise and people being able to work together with some form of market force mediating the exchange of different sort of outcomes of different produce of expertise, highly refined expertise, has produced enormous amounts of value. But in the modern world, we have companies that are outsized and are squashing other companies because they're just too big, and there's an embedded obligation for growth where it's not just about producing a product which is useful for people. It's about producing market, performing well in the market, so shareholders have a benefit as well, right? So there's a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders and to people who are dependent on a particular company going really well, which is different from the company actually producing material output for the general community. So there's market forces which seem very hard to control. But there might be a difference there between government and governance, which, there could be a role for some forms of governance, like regulating on AI weaponization, or trying to regulate the use of certain types of algorithms being used to produce potentially dangerous pathogens and all those sorts of things. So, I'm just wondering, maybe it's all some big game theoretic problem that's just too hard to compute. But I just wonder about your thoughts on governance and market dynamics producing embedded obligations for growth, which might be inimical to the interests of many people out there who aren't shareholders and stuff.
Yeah, so I don't know how much insight I have other than to say that if there is something that an artificial intelligence company could do with their technology that's going to be enormously beneficial to them, then it's hard to see what governance, either through governments or contracts that they make with other people or promises or whatever. It's hard to see what would stop them from using the technology to do the thing that's going to be hugely beneficial to them. So I guess, governance of any kind, I'm sort of skeptical that that's going to, in the end, be successful. It'll probably stop some people from engaging in the activity, but there's always going to be somebody sort of who is able to elude the detection of whoever the governors of the relevant technology are. I guess that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. So, I mean, I think, drugs are a big problem. At least the hard ones like fentanyl and heroin are a big problem in the United States. I wouldn't want to say, hey, look, people are always going to, take heroin, so you shouldn't even try to, stop people from dying of heroin and, selling it. I think it may be worth trying all the same to prevent this stuff. But if you're just asking me, like, is it likely to be successful? I think probably not. And that's unfortunate. I don't know if I have much more, helpful to say beyond that.
Yeah, that's fine. One of the I guess, unsettling things that I worry about for my own well-being, because I also think humans are awesome, is that AI may optimize for some morally real configuration of reality and it might think that humans are just a suboptimal, although pretty good, but not quite optimal instantiation of a moral outcome. So may decide, okay, well, let's just wipe the slate and start again, right? Okay, let's just, okay, thanks humans for bootstrapping me, and so long, and thanks for all the fish, I'm going to start again. And just starts going about reseeding life and growing it in such a way that it produces agents which are more capable of experiencing varieties, spectrums, textures of ideal experiences in the real world, and are not evil and generally choose really good things.
Yeah.
Would you be worried if AI said, okay, well, the most optimal utopia is one that doesn't include you? Would you be okay to sign off on that?
So we're imagining that, like, the morally best thing, like the AI, found out, and let's suppose it's true. I mean, if it is true that, like, it's morally best that we be eliminated from existence, would I be okay with that? I think at the end of the day, like, I mean, just descriptively, I'd be like, no, like, I'd probably just, through weakness of will, say, don't kill me. I don't care if I don't care what morality says, like, because I'm not a good person. But I guess I think, it follows from my view that, like, that's what it morally ought to do. Now, my own view is that it's probably not going to be the case that that's the morally best thing to do, to wipe us out. So I'm a little, I'm not terribly worried that, like, it's going to, out of its moral duty, then wipe us out. Because I just don't, I think, like, we're morally valuable, and whatever else is morally valuable, like, we can all coexist. But at the end of the day, like, if it's better morally that we be wiped out, then I guess I'm committed to the view that we ought to be wiped out. And I'm not, I guess I can't rule that out. That would be unfortunate, and I would, out of weakness of will, hide and, like, try not to be killed, even though I, think that it's probably morally best that I don't. But I mean, and that's just, like, there are lots of things that I think I morally ought to do, but I don't do because I don't want to, because I'm, like, not a good person. And that's just another case. Like, descriptively, I would not submit to be killed, but I guess if it's true that, it's morally best if I die, then I guess I think I probably should be killed.
Couldn't we just sort of vote for some sort of permissible outcome where, humans... it spends a minute amount of resources just to uplift humans into some sort of ideal form through some form of, like, a transition where we kind of maintain a semblance of identity in a similar way that you're not the same Eric Sampson that you were when you were 3 years old playing with toys and cars. I don't know what toys you played with, but, you're a different person now, right? Even most of the cells in your body are completely different, and you've got a mind which is a lot more mature, and you can think about things, but you do have memories as a child, and there's some form of continuum going on. So intuitively, I hope for that kind of outcome, because, I'd like to progress as well. I wouldn't want to just have a God snapped its fingers and God AI or whatever, and suddenly I'm turned into something that is completely different. There's absolutely no causal continuum except from a snap of the fingers, which had nothing to do with my own agency or whatever. Yeah, what about a posthuman future, in short?
I'm not opposed to it at all. And I mean, under the scenario I was imagining, like, if there is an alternative like what you described to killing us, then I say we should take that. But suppose, like, there just isn't, then I think, we should be killed. But now to your question, like, is this the thing that could could happen, that we could be uplifted, or we could receive like an implant in our brain that makes us. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally fine with that. I think it would still be me. It would be a more it would be a more interesting and smarter and better me in many ways, and so I'm perfectly happy with that. Is that so one question is like, is that possible for our future? I think, yeah, sure. I don't see any in principle reason to think it's not. I think it's probably not likely in my lifetime, but I have no moral objections to it. I mean, if you just think about what we do in education, like what we're trying to do is get smarter, and we're doing it by like reading books and talking about things and writing papers and stuff like that. If you could achieve that same result, but just by sticking a thing in your head, is that okay? And I think, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's a more efficient means of trying to do the thing that you're doing, which is trying to be a better reasoner and trying to learn more stuff. So yeah, I'd be perfectly happy with that. And I guess I hope that, eventually we get there. I hope I eventually get a brain implant that makes me more, able to control my impulses and like do the things that I think are important and sit down and do my work like I'm supposed to, and be present with my family in a way that I should, in the way that I'm not always, because I'm thinking about a million other things. Yeah, I hope for a much better version of myself. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A while ago, I finished reading Nick Bostrom's Deep Utopia. Mm-hmm. Very good book. Thoroughly recommend it. It's in a strange format, but it's long. Anybody who picks it up shouldn't put it down too quickly. It's a great book. But one of the things that it deals in is a meaning of life in a post instrumental society. So, what does it look like? I mean, in the near term, we're staring down the barrel of reduced amounts of slots in the workforce for us to gain some form of like income, because AI is moving into many other areas, and at least in theory may be able to do a better job than a lot of people in cognitive labor, and perhaps even in physical labor in the future. And then after, just having a post-instrumental future, we might end up having a completely plastic future where, technological mastery means that we can become sort of fogs of nanotech, or foglets, as some people call it, and we can basically morph into anything that we want to. But we can't really provide any economically useful, instrumentally useful input into the economy, and so must look for meaning and reasons to live beyond the dignity of hard labor and, the virtue of the sweat of one's brow after working hard in the field for a season in order to grow crops to survive and get the next sort of, survive the next winter. What does moral realism have to say about the type of utopia that we should design to maintain what you think is virtuous forms of meaning generation? Do you think people should have to work even though it's not really provide anything instrumentally useful to the economy?
Yeah, this is a great question. Yeah, so I don't think moral realism has anything specific to say about this, but I think this is something that many moral realists would in fact say, which is this, that no, we shouldn't continue working. I mean, the point of work is to, achieve the task that, you're setting out to achieve. So we shouldn't go around farming if farming is more or less solved, and we don't need it. So what should we be doing with our lives? I mean, here's one answer. You should be doing activities that are good for their own sake. That is, they're good not because they get you this other thing. They're good in and of themselves. So what kind of activities are those? Well, philosophy is one. So talking about, this sort of stuff. I mean, one question I have is like, yeah, but what if you could just go to the philosophy guy, you just ask them all your philosophical questions, you could have them answered. Like, what do you do then? Yeah, then things like, sports, playing, basketball or soccer or games, or having conversations with people, smoking a pipe, or I don't know, going out for drinks. Like, these are all things that are good for their own sake. That is, and they're good not because they get you this extra thing. They're just like the activity itself is good. but in general, I think it's going to be, so what should we be doing? The answer is going to be like engaging in these sorts of like activities. That is the kinds of things that make your life worth living. Like maybe even producing art. And you may wonder like, yeah, but what if like I can get a painting better than anything that I could paint? But if you think like, no, what you're doing when you're like, painting and like, creating art, sculpting is you're exercising your creative capacities and your ingenuity and your problem solving skills, and you're developing those, then that's the point of engaging in the artwork. It's not to the product that you get at the end. Of course, you could just ask the AI, it'll just present that for you. But that's not the point of the activity. The point of the activity is like the ingenuity that it takes and the heart and the problem solving that you're doing. It's in this way like a video game. Like, why are video games cool? They're cool because like they're using your creativity and your ingenuity to solve the artificial obstacles that you've set in your way. Games are just artificial obstacles, and but games are awesome and they're good for their own sake. Video games are like that, and all other kinds of games are like that. So I think the same thing is true of sculpting and art and basketball and soccer and all these things that are good for their own sake. And why are they good for their own sake? Because they're ways of exercising your uniquely human capacities. And they're improving on them and like exercising them. And I think that's good for its own sake. So that was all one big long way of saying we're going to have to find activities that are good, not because they produce us a thing, but they're good in and of themselves, or good for their own sakes. That's how we're going to have to fill our time. I should say, just on the religious point, in some ways we've already confronted this problem. Religious people think there's going to be this thing called heaven, and it's going to be a place where like there is a super intelligent AI who can tell you everything you want. It's just called God. So if you have any questions, like God will answer them for you. And if you have any material needs, like he'll give them to you. So what do people think they're going to be doing in heaven? A standard story about what we're doing in heaven is we're just hanging out with each other, playing, doing like the cool things that you do in life, but they're not work things. They're these sorts of activities that you do for their own sake. You're, eating meals together, and you're, talking, and you're playing, and you're, driving jet skis, or I don't know, you're just having fun. You're, hanging out with each other, living in community with, both your fellow human beings and God, loving each other. That's what you're doing. So that's, that's the kind of thing we would be doing in a solved world.
Right. Would you, okay, so back to the religion, because you brought it up. Would you be, I'm not sure what denomination you're from, or whether you're from a denomination, but there's different views on how Christianity should be implemented in society. Is there a utopia, a Christian utopia, that you'd want AI to be optimized towards? Or would you prefer AI to actually come at that utopia through the indirect normativity we just spoke at before? Yeah,
so are you saying like, oh, Eric, would you want the AI to make everybody live in a Christian utopia? Is that what you're imagining? Like, or just like, would you want it to have some people living in it?
Well, yeah. So maybe the bubble utopia, where you have some people who want to live in the Christian utopia can do so, and then the plurality utopia. Is that where you'd? Yeah, so I'd certainly be.
I would. For sure, I would live in sort of if it's a utopia and it's a Christian utopia, then I'd be like, I'd be on board with that. And furthermore, if Christianity is true, suppose it is, and suppose the superintelligent AI knows that Christianity is true, then I would want it to create, that sort of utopia, at least on a small scale. Now, would I want it to make? What about would I want the AI to make everybody a Christian? Well, first of all, I don't think you can do that. I think, it's a thing that you have to choose for yourself. So even a super intelligent AI can't make you be a Christian. One thing it could do is, if it knows that Christianity is true, it can sort of give you the evidence that it's true, and, tell you that, hey, look, if you want to believe the truth, it's in your interest to convert. And, I would hope that if, superintelligence knows that some religion is true, then it would tell us that, and it would and it's in our interest to, get in line with that, because that's the way reality is. So I would want superintelligent AI to, proselytize or evangelize, that is, tell other people the truth about this thing and try to get them to believe it, because it's in their interest to believe it. But I guess I wouldn't want it to force them to do it, because, Christianity is one of these things where, you're supposed to be in a relationship with God voluntarily, And so a loving relationship with God that you engage in voluntarily can't be forced upon you. So even super intelligent AI couldn't do that. So I wouldn't want it to try to do something that it couldn't possibly do, which would be enormously harmful to people anyways. So yeah, I wouldn't want it to like try to make everybody a Christian, except in the sense that like report to everyone and maybe try to convince them that, you know, Christianity is true, if it is in fact true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. If superintelligence could explain why Christianity is true in such a way that was verifiably convincing instead of just rhetorically convincing,
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I would want it to, give reason, not just like, you know, manipulate people into believing Christianity. Yeah. I mean, like, presumably, if Christianity is true, then that means Jesus rose from the dead, which means that there's probably excellent evidence that he rose from the dead. And already there are philosophers who argue about the resurrection of Jesus and try to cite the evidence. But presumably it would do a better job of citing the evidence, and it would go gather new evidence and all that kind of stuff. It could present the argument, and then, you know, on that basis, people would be believing in, you know, the resurrection of Jesus or whatever. I think that would be great. You know, basically, all it's doing is just reporting to you the truth. I mean, we're imagining that Christianity is in fact true. All it's doing is just reporting to you the truth and the evidence that it's true, and I think that's awesome. Like, yeah, that's what I want superintelligence to do, is like tell me what's true and why it's true, and help me have true beliefs. That's great.
Would you step into a Nozick's experience machine if you could experience, if it was all just about experience and not commitments with other people, or, living in a world that was at least close to foundational reality? Would you be happy to step into a Nozick's experience machine and experience some sort of exquisite utopia, but not necessarily with other people, just with yourself?
No, I wouldn't. Well, at least, I mean, look, if you told me, well, as long as hedonism isn't true, and as far as I'm concerned, like, I don't think hedonism is true. That is the view that your life is going well to the extent that you're experiencing pleasure, and badly to the extent that you're experiencing pain. I think hedonism is false, and so I wouldn't get into the experience machine, because I think that it would not give me the best life for me. In fact, I think it would be a very bad life, because it would just be a ton of pleasure. I mean, pleasure is good. Like, there are much worse lives than the experience machine, for sure. So, you know, I'd much rather be in the experience machine than being tortured for all eternity in the real world. But no, I think even like an ordinary human life is going to be better even than the experience machine life, because at least one way of understanding the experience machine is you're having all these experiences, but they're not, they're intensely pleasurable, but none of them are the product of your own agency. It's more or less like a movie that's happening in front of you, and it's fun, but you're not doing any of it. You may have the experience of winning an NBA championship or climbing Mount Everest, but you're not doing any of it. I guess I think, no, I mean, the experience machine sort of reduces me just to this little, like, you know, well, non-agent, just like, you know, pleasure vessel. And like, I think I'm not, I aspire to more than that, to living a more valuable life than that. And I think there's a lot of value that's achieved by exercising your own agency to achieve good things in the world. And that's totally lost in the experience machine. So no, I wouldn't get it. But if you said, Eric, no, but hedonism is true, now will you? Then yeah, of course, yeah, I'd jump in. Yeah.
if I said it, wouldn't you need evidence?
Well, yeah. Sure, I mean, if I were like, if you said, yeah, if it were true that hedonism were true, then yeah, jump in.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Now I had a question. What was it? Oh God, I forgot. Okay. Now, let me just think. I think it would be great to have like experience machines as like video games where you could just step in for a little bit of time.
Yep.
Have you ever read Permutation City by Greg Egan?
No.
Oh, hard science fiction author from Australia. Very, very amazing writing. But one of his characters has a copy of himself put in a virtual reality. I don't remember if it was a copy or actually himself, but he has this cron job in the background. A cron job is just some timing sort of algorithm in computers, and you can just set it to kick off and do something at some time in the future. Mm-hmm. So a cron job would sort of wake him out of this little experience thing. So he was living in this virtual reality where he obtained some sort of immense amount of joy from making table legs. And his goal in this little virtual reality was to make as many table legs as possible, or just reach a certain amount. But the cron job kicks in and said, "Hey, okay, you should try something else, because otherwise, if you do that for the rest of the time and all eternity, it's going to be kind of boring." even though you don't experience it as being boring. Would you be okay with a Nozick experience machine with a timer?
Um, if it's a short timer, yeah. I mean, in that way, I sort of see it as like, like I don't know, like maybe like taking drugs. Like taking drugs is a temporary like, oh, it's just like this is fun, and that's sort of the value of the drugs for the most part. I mean, I guess it depends on what drugs you take, but I mean, it's just like a temporary like, oh, this is really good, and really there's no other sort of value associated with it, just the good feeling. And I think, like, would I ever take drugs? I mean, sure. Just like a temporary, good feeling thing, and then, nothing else. I think, sure. And I think I take it that the experience machine where you're just making table legs and loving it is very similar. You're not doing anything valuable other than just experiencing the pleasure. I think, yeah, for a short period of time, no problem. That's, same thing that you're doing in drugs. You're experiencing pleasure, not doing really anything else valuable. That's fine for a short period of time. I wouldn't want to make a habit of it, just like I wouldn't want to make a habit of drugs, just because I don't want to be sitting around doing nothing valuable other than just, having these good feelings.
If you woke up and found that all your life up to this point, all the commitments, the family connections, the friends, the job, the university commitments that you've had, you found out that, you had an experience of free will, but you found that it was a layer. You're in some kind of simulation. You didn't know whether it was a Nozick's experience machine, so you may actually have choice in this life or not. I don't know if you believe in free will or if you are a compatibilist. Maybe I should ask that question first. But let's just say you found a way to check out basement reality, which you weren't in. Would you go and check out basement reality and leave this one behind?
I think I would. I really like my life. In fact, every day I'm amazed by how lucky I've gotten, and this isn't born of I want to get out of this world. But I do think when I've thought about the experience machine a lot, and I think and you may know there's this reverse experience machine. Suppose you found out that you were in the experience machine the whole time, your whole life was in the experience machine. Yeah. Wouldn't you want to stay? And I guess I think, no, I would want to, if you told me this was all fake and it felt like this was all the product of my agency, but not a single bit of it was, I would say, oh, dang, that's surprising. But I guess then I need to get out of here. And I guess I'll miss my family, but I guess I'll also know that they were never real. But yeah, I mean, so it would be a bummer in many ways. But yeah, I guess I think I would want to get out of this experience machine if it is in fact an experience machine, yeah.
What's your stance on free will? Are you just no free will, a compatibilist, or complete free will?
Yeah, I hold these views super lightly because I find the free will stuff super hard. But, my default is a libertarian about free will. That is, I do have free will. So I'm I think that I'm myself an agent cause. So I am sort of a big, in this respect, at least like God, where I am the beginning of causal chains. So causal chains can begin and end with me. So I can be, experience certain things that don't themselves have to influence anything in the future. I'm the kind of thing where they can stop. So if, I experience bad, somebody treats me terribly, I don't have to let this affect me or affect my future actions. I could be the kind of one who ends the causal chain and then begins causal chains as well. That's all very mysterious, and I want to grant that, and I want to say I have no easy answers to free will, and I actually hold these views very lightly. If at the end of the day you told me, sorry, Eric, I actually know the truth and compatibilism is true, I'd be like, well, okay, that's fine. Or, hard determinism is true, I'd be like, no, okay. But, I tend to think that I do have free will and that I'm an agent cause. I'm in that way like God.
So does this I guess taint or tint your views on the future of ethics or moral realism? If people are real choice makers beyond just mere compatibilism, what does that say about having a force like an artificial intelligence, a force out there? Do you think AI could ever be completely free? Would it be able to have a merge a sense of free will in the same way as humans have free will? And if so, would that be okay? Morally?
I guess I'm inclined to think, yeah. I mean, if I, biological creature that I am, can be the kind of thing that could have free will, then I don't see why, an artificial intelligence couldn't just the same. And if that's, so I think it could be free and in fact, in many ways more free than me, because I'm sort of subject to lots of urges and pushes and pulls, from my evolutionary history that an artificial intelligence isn't. And so in many ways, it could be sort of more free to make decisions and to act on the basis of what it considers right and wrong than I could. And now your question is like, well, is that right? Like, is that good or bad or something like that? And I guess I think, I don't know. It's not especially good. It's not especially bad either. I think it's just another agent that comes into existence, and there's lots of them already. This one's just a lot smarter and cooler than me, but it's free will. The fact that it has free will isn't especially good or bad. In addition to its already being the kind of creature that it is, not creature, but thing that.
If moral realism is true, do you think it will find the pattern of agency in the physical world? Like, is agency, does it have some form of isomorphic, is there some pattern of molecules that constitute freedom?
Do you think that
we'll find that?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to say it's a constellation of molecules or something like that. I mean, certainly, I guess at bottom, like, it is, but it's, I think free will is probably some, like, functional thing that we have where we're able to stand above our inclinations and our urges, and we're able to evaluate whether or not, what we're inclined to do is in fact a good thing, and we can act on that basis. And of course, it has to be that somewhere in there is like not causal determinism. So no, I've forgotten the question that I was answering. Your question was.
Yeah, would we be able to find like some form of constellation of like
right.
in particles, like patterns in the fabric of reality that would entail freedom?
Yeah, I think in one sense, yes. In another sense, it wouldn't identify it as in terms of the pattern of like small scale particles. Instead, it would identify it at like a higher level of abstraction, something about the nature of, it would put it probably in terms of intentions and mind and decisions and those sorts of things that are realized by, physical things. So yeah, I think it would identify the broad scale features that give rise to this thing called free will. But it just wouldn't put it at the level of, physics. It would put it at a higher level. It would put it in terms of mental talk. In part because I think that, there can be minds that are not realized in any sort of physical form, and they can also be free. They can also make decisions. They can have free will. So, for instance, I think God is a non-physical creature, not creature, but being. He's an agent and has free will and has a mind, can make decisions, but isn't realized in any physical form at all.
Okay. Do you think, like, how like we have a lot of different sort of pillars of academic discipline? We have physics, we have biology, we have chemistry, and we have like other forms of science. If AI becomes an expert in all these columns of academic expertise, will it be able to sort of find the gaps in between? Will AI not just see these as completely separate columns? Will it see them as like just points in the continuum of description from fundamental reality through to something like chemistry or psychology or do you think there's a continuum of realness between each of these columns of academic discipline that we use to sort of compartmentalize things?
Yeah, good. This is a hard question. So basically, are there bridge laws between, say, physics and chemistry and biology, biology and psychology and economics? Yeah. Well, I guess I think it will have judgments about those things if reality, in fact, contains such bridge laws. But in order to know what the AI would think about whether there are bridge laws or whether it would unify these things, I'd have to know what reality is like, whether there are any such things, and I have no idea. I don't know if, at the end of the day, these are all just reality is kind of layered, and there's like discrete layers where like there are physical laws, but they're in no way like easily translatable into chemical laws. I don't know if like reality is like a cake where like a layer cake where there's just like all these layers and they're, connected to each other, but like, in some ways like separate, or if it's more or less like one continuous cake and we just cut it up in various ways. I don't know what reality's like. So it's hard to say what the AI would do, but my guess is that reality is like the one continuous cake and then we cut it up in various ways. That's my guess.
That's my intuition as well.
Yeah, so if I had to guess, I would guess that it will discover the bridge laws between the various disciplines, and it will be able to describe those to us and enlighten our science in interesting ways.
Let's just say you needed to make a trade-off between autonomy and well-being. If it was up to you, would you put more weight on autonomy than hedonic well-being? How would you go about determining what the right trade-off would be if there was to be a trade-off?
So it's always going to depend on the details. So we got to figure out like how autonomous are we and how much, pleasure and pain are we? So, cause I can imagine like if you just get a tiny bit of autonomy and like you're, ecstatically blissful, everybody, then I guess maybe in that case, I'd go with, bliss. But, if it's, in general, I'm probably going to lean toward autonomy. And why is that? Well, because I think that we're the kinds of creatures that, this is going to be a spooky way of putting it, but I think our purpose, or at least what we're for, the way we best flourish is by exercising our capacities. And the point of our existence is not just to experience pleasure. We have what you might call higher or more important things to achieve in our lives. And, that's what we need autonomy for. And pleasure is a good thing to get, but pleasure is often best when it's accompanied by like, something that you used your agency and your autonomy to achieve, and you're taking pleasure in something that you've done. It's not just a disconnected from any sort of like thing that you're taking pleasure in. I think for the most part, the best kinds of pleasures and the most valuable ones are ones where you're taking pleasure in something that you've done, some achievement or some friendship or some like discovery that you've made. Whereas like the pleasures that are just like zapped into your head by, are less valuable because you're not taking pleasure in anything interesting that you've done. So yeah, that's the reason I say I tend to go towards autonomy. To the extent that pleasure is good, I think it's at least more valuable, maybe only valuable, when it's connected with taking pleasure in something that is worthy of, taking pleasure in.
Would you? Okay, so imagine in the future there's less bridges, less. I mean, we're skull-bound. We have brains that are sort of shaped to sort of function around the operation of this body here. Mm-hmm. But there are examples where people are conjoined at the head. They've got a thalamic bridge, the Hogan sisters, for instance. Mm-hmm. And there is reportedly some form of phenomenal experience transferred between the two metaphysical egos, can I say. One of them eats a pie with sauce. I'm a vegetarian, I wouldn't eat it. But the other one hates sauce, so it screws up her face. One of them's facing a block. But the other one can't see the block, but reaches its arm to go grab it. Weird, right? I don't know like how much science is behind all this, but assuming it ignites my curiosity about hive minds, can I say? And I think if the Borganism was a good thing, would you join it? If it wasn't sort of reigned over by an evil queen and wanting to assimilate everybody against their will, would you join a hive mind, at least maybe even like temporarily, in sharing agency across different minds or sharing experience? Who knows what could be shared, right? Maybe there'd be some sort of agential sharing. Maybe it would be experiential. Maybe it would be meaning sharing. Would you Would you try? Would you try it? Would you join a hive mind?
I don't think I have any in principle objections to it. I mean, obviously, my first inclination would be like, I need to really be convinced. But in principle, I have no objection to it because.
Would it be futile to have any objections to it?
I mean,
Just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, I think just as like, I can live a valuable life by exercising my autonomy and, having achievements and like discovering things and having good relationships and stuff like that. That could also be achieved, like, I could achieve that in community, perhaps with other people by means of a hive mind or something like that. And I think that's also a cool way to live. It's a valuable way to live. We could have autonomy, like we could sort of maybe communicate about what our goals are or what our aims are and set out to try to achieve those and like share our conscious experiences and our thoughts with one another and our discoveries. And I think, that's like living in a very close-knit community. And I think that's a good way to live, like in community with other people. Typically we do that separated, our minds are separated from them. But another way you could do it is with your mind fused with theirs. And that's a cool way to do it. I'm imagining here that there's like some degree of separation between me and them. You might say, but what if like there's just now you become one with all these people? Would you do it then? Yeah, harder to say in that case. That's a harder case. I don't know. I'll just say this. It's not obvious that I wouldn't or that I shouldn't. I mean, I would die. I mean, I guess if what's happening is like I'm becoming one with all these people, then I guess whatever creature that is, it's no longer Eric Sampson because this guy's not a mind meld of like a whole bunch of other people. So this thing's going out of existence and it's, now something else is there. So I would be dying, but would I do it? It's I guess I'm leaning towards no, but I'm certainly open to it. I'm certainly open to exploring.
It is interesting. You brought up the idea of what dying, what dying might be, but it's a bit of a permeable sort of concept where it has changed throughout time. Like I think there's in a sense people thought that you died when your heart stopped or when you just stopped moving, but now people think it's something to do with brain death. Now far future heart science fiction writers have spoke about sort of etching their mind into like a computer, so as a means of travel and also a means of backup, right? Catastrophes do happen in science fiction. And also splitting and merging. Would you think that it'd be permissible to have people sort of make copies of themselves, split, have mind files or like different, and then merge together and back up on sort of disks? Would that be so I started off talking about death, didn't I? Do you think the concept of death will change significantly with future technological advancement like cryonics and suspension over long periods of time and distance? Do you think it needs to, or do you think there'll be some sort of core feature about our current conception of death that would be eternal? Does that matter morally?
Yeah. So I guess I think we'll still apply the same concept of death. And here's why. Because, I mean, even when you're copying your mind and you're like, putting it from one place to another, I guess I think what you're doing is you're not producing more you, you're producing copies of you. So in each case that you copy, you're creating a distinct but qualitatively identical version of yourself. So it's just a duplicate of you, but it's not you. A duplicate of me is not me. So it's just a, perfect, copy. But I'm right here. So I think that when I die, when this mind goes out of existence, there's a question about, well, could this mind be uploaded into a computer? Well, it could certainly be copied into a computer. That much is obvious. But again, I would just say, well, that's a copy of my mind. It's not me. I would be interested to know, and here's just one reason to think that. So like, if you take a copy of my mind and you upload it to a computer, that mind could go off and do all kinds of things. And I guess I think whatever that mind does, like, I'm not responsible for that. If that mind goes off and like kills a bunch of people, like, you shouldn't take me to jail. I didn't do that. That is the duplicate of me did it. And that suggests that the copy of me isn't me at all. And similarly, like, if you take a copy of me and upload it to some computer, and then I go off and kill people, you shouldn't go arrest that and torture that, or, do terrible things to that. Like, I'm the one who did it. That suggests that we're distinct. So then I think you can't upload your mind to a computer. When people say, like, how do you feel about mind uploading? I guess I think it's not possible. It's either a loose way of saying how do you feel about copies of your mind, of uploading your copies of your mind, in which case, like, in principle I have no objection to it, but I don't think that this mind that I have could be uploaded to a computer. It might be essentially a brain thing. However, if I'm a soul, then still it's hard to see how you're gonna upload souls onto a computer, though I don't have super strong views about the nature of souls. Like, could a soul be encapsulated in a program? I don't know.
Whether souls are physical and have material basis. Well, what about the gradual replacement idea? Would you be okay with gradually replacing you cell by cell with artificial cells that would enable you to then live for a long period of time or indefinitely, and allow you all forms of morphological possibilities?
I think I'm open to it. Now the question is, well, will gradual replacement kill you? Like, will it be you once you're gradually replaced? I guess I have to think that it wouldn't kill me if it's gradual enough, because I've already been gradually replaced.
You're not dead, right?
Yeah, and I survived.
Our common sense idea of the term.
Yeah, like, I'm the same creature that I was. The 5-year-old Eric and me, we're the same guy. But we've been gradually replaced. I'm totally different atoms. So yeah, I have to think that I can survive gradual replacement. So I guess I don't have any in principle objection to that, because that you're basically just giving me a much longer life. The reason I hesitate is because, and this is why personal identity is hard, and I don't have any like subtle views about this thing. But yeah, if gradual replacement is still me, then the question is, like, what about all at once replacement? Like, why does it matter that it's gradual? Well, here's the problem with all at once replacement. Here's why I don't think it's me. It's because, take all those atoms that you would gradually replace me with, and just like remove them and like create a new thing beside me. And then there's me as I biologically am. It seems like all the atoms that would be used to gradually replace me, if you like created a being right beside me, that wouldn't be me. It would be again, a duplicate of me. And so this is all a way of saying, I don't know what to think about personal identity. And this is why I think I am sort of like, reluctantly, I default to like, I must be a soul, because like when I try to think of myself as a biological material, as a biological organism or a material thing, I get into all these paradoxes about like, gradual replacement and, teletransporter cases and fusion and splitting and all that kind of stuff. So it's a mess. The only view, according to which, it's not a total mess, is the soul view. I mean, I'm not saying the soul view has no problems. I'm just saying it's the least problematic of all very problematic views about personal identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think Les had a question. Like, I got a message from him. Les, do you want to chime in with your question if you're there?
Yeah, thanks.
Or questions?
It's going back right to the very beginning about the discussion about moral realism. So hearing you speak, Eric, I'm interested in what you think is the ontology of morality. And one thing that perked me up was when you said that, paraphrasing, morality is about the relations between people in a society, and in a way where we achieve or try and achieve well-being for everyone, or something like that. And I'm thinking, relating that to the mind independence stance of moral realism. And I'm thinking that if morality is fundamentally about well-being and negotiating relationships between people in a society, then that's about minds and how they relate. So thinking about, I understand you're not for a Platonic type realm where moral facts reside in this completely otherworldly realm. So I'm thinking then, how do you see the ontology of morality?
Yeah, good. So when I said all that stuff about, morality being about cooperation and well-being and that kind of stuff, I was just trying to loosely characterize what morality is about. It's not about like, I don't know, like whatever it is, it's got to have something to do with how human beings are, how their lives are going. And that means that, what the moral truths are is going to be constrained by that sort of conceptual constraint. Okay, but now the question is like, well, what do you think about the ontology of morality? Well, in some sense, I kind of do believe in a Platonic realm in this sense that the moral properties, rightness, wrongness, that sort of stuff, those are abstract properties. That is, they can be instantiated in many places at once. They're not located in physical space. They're not subject to you can't create or destroy them. So in that sense, they're abstract objects. They're not objects in the sense that they have shape and size and weight and all that kind of stuff, but they're abstract in the sense that numbers are abstract. 2 isn't located anywhere. It has no shape or space. It didn't begin to exist. That's sort of stuff. Rightness and wrongness, I think, are properties like that. So that's, I guess, when you're asking me what's the ontology, I guess I want to say that's at least some broad scale features of the properties. I mean, the other thing about the properties is just that they supervene on, our non-moral facts. So rightness and wrongness aren't untethered from reality. They are tethered in this sense. They're grounded in facts about how human beings behave and what their intentions are and what they think and what their rights are. So that's some more stuff about the ontology. They're the kinds of things that can be grounded in the non-moral facts. And beyond that, I don't know if I have much more to say about their nature and what the properties are like. I don't know if that answers your question or just raises 10 million more questions, but that's the things that occur to me in the moment.
No, thanks. It certainly clarified for me. I mean, you call yourself a robust moral realist, and I would put that kind of position as obviously a cognitivist position, but I wouldn't classify it as a moral realist position. But there are different. I mean, moral philosophers disagree among themselves about what are the features of moral realism. So we can certainly not agree entirely on that. But that's very enlightening. Thanks very much, Eric.
Yep.
So, Les, do you want to respond with why you disagree with the framing of Eric's position as moral realist, as opposed to whatever you might think
so
it be?
I take moral realism to entail cognitivism, but moral realism is a stronger position than just cognitivism, and the way it's stronger is that it literally puts moral facts outside there in the world, pretty much completely independent of human judgments, attitudes, and I see Eric's talking about human flourishing being kind of what's at base in moral negotiations. I take that to be more mind dependent, and I can understand Eric when he's saying that these are conceptual, sure, but even the concept of desire is conceptual. I mean, you don't find the concept of desire out there in the real world like atoms. Desire is a concept, but obviously it's a concept that is about human mental things. So that's why I don't class it as, or at least a robust realism. But that's fine. I mean, it's just the different labels we put. It's about how we cut and dice the various moral theories. Nothing really all that much hangs on it, I don't think. Not substantively, anyway. Thanks.
Fascinating. Well, what would you say? I mean, there's different ways to sort of position yourself within the moral spectrum. Does it matter if you call yourself a moral realist or an idealist or whatever? I'm surely it helps if there's cohesive banners under which to stand, that everybody knows your position and knows how to categorize you. But what are your thoughts, Eric?
Well, so I mean, it sounds like one reason to think like maybe I'm not a moral realist is because I think that morality is about human well-being, but I guess I think, what is it for a human being's life to go well? Well, it doesn't depend on what a human being thinks. So what is well-being? I mean, so I'm an objective lister, so I think like this isn't like a terribly systematic view, but basically the idea is like your life is going well to the extent that you have lots of different things, pleasure, achievement, knowledge, autonomy, virtue, all these things make your life go well. And why is it that those things make your life go well? Well, it's not because you happen to like those things or you believe that those things are good for you or anything like that. Those things are good for you independent of anyone's attitudes. And that's the sense in which it's a realist view. Now, realism is sometimes characterized as a view that the moral truths are mind independent. And in some sense, that's true. And in another sense, it's not. I mean, we are committed to the view that pleasure matters, and pleasure is a feature of people's mind. They're either in pleasure or not. But whether someone is in pleasure isn't up to anyone. And whether pleasure is good or bad, according to the realist, doesn't depend on anyone's attitude. So the sense in which realists are, they think that the truths are attitude independent is this. It doesn't matter what you think about the moral truths. Nothing about what you think about the moral truths makes them true or false. They're all made true independent of anyone's attitudes. But that doesn't mean that people's attitudes aren't important. So, a lot of people are upset by offensive gestures. So I could put up my middle finger right now, and that would offend many people. That would, they would have certain attitudes of disapproval and shock, that I did that. I think that's morally relevant. That's a feature of their minds and their attitudes, and that's morally relevant. And I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't offend people needlessly in that way because of the attitudes they're going to take. But I thought you were an attitude independent guy, Eric. I am, but here's the sense in which what I mean is like people's attitudes toward the content of the moral truths don't make them true or false. But that doesn't mean that like what people's attitudes aren't morally relevant in some cases. The sort of like attitudes that you'll arouse in them by engaging in certain behaviors matters morally, but their attitudes towards the content of the moral truths doesn't make them true or false. I don't know if that may just make it even more.
Oh, no.
The idea was...
I think we are closer on this because I'm a semi-cognitivist. I wouldn't call myself a realist for the reasons that I give, but I think that moral truths have genuine, substantive moral content, and for the kind of reasons that you give. So certainly on board with that. Yeah, I think we're very much closer than what maybe at first appearance appears.
Great.
That's great. That's fascinating. You brought up like human-centric sort of moral realism. Actually, it's probably a bastardization. Do you think like animals have moral significance? If an animal had enough cognitive power in the right way, would it have some form of moral, sort of not just patienthood, but what is it? Moral agency?
Yeah.
Moral...
Yeah, so there are moral agents and moral patients. So moral agents are the kinds of things that you can blame, and they can do right and wrong actions. Whereas mere patients aren't even capable of blame or rightness and wrongness, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think animals are definitely morally important. They're the kinds of creatures that can suffer, and things can go well or badly for them. They may even be the kinds of creatures that, can have non-pleasure and pain kinds of goods. Like it might be good for a lion that it's out there and eating zebras and tackling and like becoming the best version of itself or something like that. Like I'm open to that suggestion. I mean, I don't know. I don't have views about, too subtle views about lion well-being. But yeah, I think they matter morally for sure. And if they were cognitively just like us, they were just lions, I think they'd matter just the same as we do. The mere fact that it's a lion doesn't matter if they're cognitively as sophisticated as we are, and they can, make judgments about rightness and wrongness, or have achievements, or have friendships just the same as we can, then they're going to matter just as much as we do. And that also means that, like, if there were a super intelligent AI who is to us like we are to ants, then I think they might matter more morally than we do, in virtue of their cognitive sophistication and the kinds of, experiences and friendships and achievements that they can, that they have access to. I'm certainly open to the suggestion that super intelligent AI is more valuable than you or I, and maybe both of us together.
Maybe, yes. Would you be, like, let's just say you were to design a utopia. Oh, actually, let me step back. Okay, the first question is, let's just say humanity was going to go extinct. We knew, because climate tipping points or nuclear war or whatever, a combination of all the possible existential threats all culminating, but you had the chance to engage in some directed panspermia. Now, I'm going to be hosting a talk with somebody giving a presentation on this very soon. And the question is, would you be okay with seeding other of the 300 million potentially habitable planets by our lights would be able to have life evolve on them in our galaxy alone? Would you be okay with shooting off probes with basic building blocks of life? Would you be okay to do that if you knew that life was going to end on Earth?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I think we probably should do that. Yeah.
Are you worried at all about any of the suffering involved in, like, the evolution, the fight over resources, the constant struggle for calories in a highly competitive environment?
I certainly recognize that that's a bad thing, the suffering that all those creatures are going to endure. But if you ask me, like, is it a good thing, all things considered, that human beings came to evolve on the Earth? They had to go through all this, suffering. I'd say, yeah, I think it is. And I think all that suffering would be justified for us, even if, like, human beings went out of existence now. But I think, as a matter of fact, we won't. I think we're going to live on for billions and billions of years. And I think definitely once you consider that, then I think, I'm not a fan of all that suffering. I don't want it to be there. If I could have all that we have now without the suffering, I'd certainly take it. But I do think that I would want to, seed other planets with elementary life, even if they have to go through the evolutionary process all again, just to, have us, or creatures like us.
There's an estimated trillion to 100 trillion to many years beyond that until this Stelliferous era ends within our the current model of how the universe will change over time. And even like a highly technologically advanced civilization may still be able to huddle around white dwarfs for a lot longer than having stellar nurseries kick out new planets and stars, or new stars and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's a potentially really long time horizon which could be enjoyed by lives worth living. I kind of agree. If the only reason, if it was the only way to ensure life in the cosmos would survive, not knowing that there's any life out there already, I'd probably go for it as well.
I would hate to extinguish the possibility of all, like, value. Not that we're, like, the only things that could be valuable, but, like, we're pretty valuable, and, like, we're capable of achieving incredible amounts of value. I mean, we already have, and, like, God knows, like, what we could do, like, given trillions of years to develop even further. So, yeah, I mean, I think, like, we'd be missing out pretty big if we didn't seed other planets with elementary life. So, I mean, tons of value hangs in our future, I think.
Now, is there any positions or points that you want to highlight at this stage that I haven't asked you, or anything that you'd like resolved that you didn't get time to resolve because I butt in very rudely, or veered the conversation off into post-utopian machinations. And thanks very much for humouring me on those topics. I really do appreciate it. But yeah, have you got anything you'd like to add?
I wish I did. The AI stuff is still pretty new to me. Both the existential risk stuff and the ethics of data science stuff. The more sort of like, close to home, like, here and now kinds of stuff. So I don't have like a systematic take on all of it. I wish I did. So this would be like the perfect time to deliver it to you. But unfortunately, this is all still too new for me to even have a systematic take. So, no, I don't have anything more to say.
Well, I really do think sort of metaethics has a lot to say. Research in metaethics may help AI sort of indirectly come at a better future. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important that trained philosophers have a say in the development of AI. I'm still really interested in like the contributions of moral realism might have to AI safety, though. Mm-hmm. I think it's a serious topic. As mentioned earlier, I think that if we find that there is a correct meta-ethic or something that's more likely to be true, then we should really cash out the implications on having AI indirectly follow what's good by somehow converging on moral realness or whatever the right meta-ethic really is, yep, instead of giving it, directly specifying it or trying to contain it somehow, because if AI gets smart enough, it'll breach the containment. It seems pretty obvious, but yeah.
Yep. Sounds right.
Thanks, Eric, for a very scintillating and stimulating conversation. And your stamina.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for hanging in there, Les. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Les, too, for the questions.
Thanks for putting this on, Adam.
Yep.